our group decided to discuss intimate partner violence exposure during infancy and social functioning in middle childhood, which is an Australian mother and child cohort study. So what is intimate partner violence? Intimate partner violence, also known as IVP, is defined as physical, sexual, or psychological abuse of a person by their partner or spouse. How many are affected by IVP? Approximately 30% of women are expected to experience IPV in their lifetime. How does it affect children? Well, IVP is a very serious issue for children, with 1 in 3 Australian children experiencing IPV between their mother and an intimate partner at some point in their childhood. And what is the primary purpose of this research? It is to investigate the long-term impact of intimate partner violence exposure during infancy on social functioning in middle childhood. So the next slide, we are going to discuss the study setup. So the type of study is a longitudinal study. This is a research designed that involves repeated observations of the same variables over long periods of time. It is often a type of observational study. The participation, they gathered a total of 1,507 women who consented and were enrolled in the study in early pregnancy with their first baby. They were asked if they wanted to participate during their prenatal appointments or in just the community. The demographics, demographic characteristics were collected from women during pregnancy and in the first 3 months after birth. The picture on the right shows the data that was collected from that questionnaire. So they got their age, they got their education level, they got their relationship status, their employment, their healthcare status, their origin of birth, and the child's sex assigned at birth. So we could see that the majority of mothers were aged between 25 and 34 years at the time of enrollment, and most of them were in paid employment during pregnancy, and most of them were born in Australia. So infancy, they asked follow-up questionnaires. These were completed by 1,357 women at 12 months postpartum. Middle school age, which is 10 years postpartum, they asked the same follow-up questionnaires. However, this one included more questionnaires regarding the child and how they were able to function socially and their social skills. And these were completed by 950 women. And you can see that there was a decrease that was observed. Women who completed the 10-year follow-up were more likely to be university educated, Australian born, not on a government benefit, and were less likely to have reported depressive symptoms in their first year postpartum. So the measures that were used in the study included a composite abuse scale, also known as the CAS scale, and that is a comprehensive measure of intimate partner violence that includes items asking about emotional abuse, such as questions like, has your partner tried to keep from seeing or talking to your family? And it also asks questions regarding physical abuse, such as, has your partner pushed, grabbed, or shoved you? They also use a 5-point Likert scale. This would include answers such as never, only once, several times, once per week, or daily. And they would also use the social skills improvement system, which we will get into later on. The next slide shows the strengths and weaknesses of this study. So we'll discuss the strengths first. The first strength is the longitudinal nature of the study. The benefit is that by following the same group of individuals over an extended period of time, the study can more accurately assess the long-term impacts of IPV exposure during infancy and until the age of 10. The second strength is that they were able to gather a sample of community mothers versus a sample of just clinical populations or from domestic violence shelters. So samples from domestic shelters, they can overrepresent extreme cases of IPV and associated factors like severe trauma, mental health issues, and economic hardship. But this community-based sample includes a range of IPV experiences from mild to severe and offers a more balanced view of its impact on social functioning. And the third strength is address limitations of previous research using comprehensive and validated measurement models. So the study addressed limitations by addressing multiple domains of social functioning, utilizing a comprehensive and validated measurement model of social functioning, along with a comprehensive measure of IPV, assessing both the physical and emotional abuse. They use the methods that we talked about earlier, such as the composite abuse scale and the SSIS. All right, so now we're going to talk about the weaknesses. So the first weakness is the study does not fully capture ethnic minorities or families experiencing poverty who have a higher likelihood of IPV. So this study was predominantly English-speaking women who were Australian-born, usually university-educated, and more socioeconomically advantaged. Therefore, the findings were not able to really capture the experiences of ethnic minorities or families. So it wasn't that diverse as they would have liked. The second weakness is reliance on self-reporting from mothers. So the study really relied on self-reporting data from mothers regarding the IPV exposure and the social functioning of their child. So it could be subject to bias. Mothers might underreport IPV due to fear or stigma or legal repercussions, or it's also possible that they may overreport positive social functioning to present their children in a favorable light. What they could have done to fix this problem or this weakness is include other sources of information such as teachers and children's reports and standardized assessments of the children's social functioning, which would have enabled more comprehensive and objective measurements. The last weakness is bidirectional influences. So the bidirectional relationship between children's social and emotional development also requires consideration as children experience early life trauma, which may have difficulties with emotion regulation. So there could have been other outside factors, not specifically intimate partner violence, that really affected this child's social skills and their social functioning.
All right, so next we will discuss results and applications. And I'll start off with social skills and behaviors. So results gathered from the social skills improvement system showed that children exposed to intimate partner violence during the first 12 months of life struggled the most in these 4 areas at age 10. Starting off with responsibility, which had a correlation score of 89%. It found that children were quick to shift blame to others and did not take responsibility for their own actions, and these are all compared to the average score. Next up, we have communication, which had a correlation score of 81%. Children did not take turns in conversations, were often interrupting. After that, we have cooperation, which had a correlation score of 90%. Children were less likely to complete assigned tasks without bothering others. And I think in the article it also mentioned that they were more likely also to ignore tasks given to them by adults. Up last, we have self-control with a correlation score of 79%. Children were less likely to stay calm when teased, which kind of segments into the next section, which is peer pressure and victimization. Okay, so up next we have results in peer problems and victimization. So, data gathered from the Strengths and Difficulties questionnaire as well as the Social Experiments questionnaire showed that children exposed to intimate partner violence during the first 12 months of life struggled the most in these areas at age 10. First, those being peer problems, which had a correlation score of 78%. Children were more likely to have difficulty making friends and to report to parents and trusted adults of not being liked by other children. Up next, we have overt victimization with a correlation score of 63%. So, still a moderate correlation, but less of an association than some of the other things we've been seeing. Children were more likely to experience physical or verbal attacks from their peers. So that's kind of stereotypical bullying, what that is measuring. Up next, we have relational victimization with a correlation score of 85%. Children were more likely to have their relationships or social status harmed through indirect or covert manipulation. Up last, we have bullying with a correlation score of 73% through one model. There is an asterisk there. Models disagreed on behaviors related to bullying. One model reported a 73% association between exposure to intimate partner violence and behaviors such as attempting to make others feel scared, physically harming other children, and intentionally sabotaging others' relationships. However, one model did not find any association between intimate partner violence exposure and bullying behaviors in those children. Of note, the authors did say that similar studies that they've looked at in the past also found inconsistent findings when examining the relationship between exposure to violence early on and bullying behaviors in those same children. All right, so now I'll go into some highlights of the author's discussion on their findings from this experiment. They said infancy is one of the most vulnerable periods for brain maturation, which places infants at an increased risk for poor development due to early life trauma. Early life trauma might increase a child's sensitivity to future stress and impact their developing emotional regulation processes and attachment to caregivers and those around them. The authors note that this is especially highlighted when children reach middle school age, because peer relationships are now more important and they're less reliant on their parents and are searching for some individual autonomy for the first time. Authors conclude that early intimate partner violence experiences may result in a heightened awareness of potential threats in their environment, such as signs of aggression or conflict from family or peers, and difficulty feeling safe within relationships and friendships. This can manifest as anger, mistrust, and aggression towards others, which are some of the behaviors we saw being more common in these children than in the average scores. All right, so the authors offered some suggestions for application from their experimental findings, mostly in the form of policy and practice. And so they suggest that policies and early intervention programs taking place prior to conception, during pregnancy, and after birth have the potential to support couples and families to develop healthy communication, positive relationships, and parenting to ultimately prevent intimate partner violence. Prevention and early intervention efforts focused on social functioning may be important to reduce intergenerational patterns of violence. They also said that this is an area that needs a lot more research. There hasn't been any long longitudinal studies going over patterns of inter partner violence and how that can affect people generationally. Education for parents about the impact of intimate partner violence on children's social development is necessary. And specifically, they mentioned targeting men, who they know are the culprits of most intimate partner violence. In Australia, at least, those statistics were from. And they suggest increased funding for school programs that identify these signs of behavior that we mentioned. Children who have witnessed intimate partner violence are more likely to display to prevent further intimate partner violence and support children develop healthy relationships and social skills if they have been exhibiting these behaviors.
So now we're going to connect this to the course content. So Sigmund Freud believed in the psychoanalytic perspective, which claims that early experiences shape our functioning later in life. And our article focuses on how exposure to intimate partner violence within the first 12 months of life affects social functioning at age 10 and beyond. He maintains that unconscious forces motivate human behavior, such as how the way one's brain was affected by viewing an event in their infancy and how it can translate to the way they act socially in their middle childhood. So an infant's temperament is closely linked to their emotional responses to the environment that surrounds them. And children's temperament can be categorized into three categories: easy, difficult, and slow to warm up. And this temperament is generally stable from ages 2 to 3 months. For example, if the infant is surrounded by chaos and violence and yelling and screaming, their temperament would reflect that. Studies have found links between this infant temperament and their personality later in their childhood. The mother's role is in infancy is warm comfort and close bodily contact, whereas the father's role varies more based on social constructs and culture, but both have been shown to directly relate to a child's social development. Altruistic behavior is defined as an activity intended to help others with no expectation of a reward, and this generally comes naturally to infants. But motivation to help and share is learned and observed, and usually between 9 and 12 months of age, infants learn by observation, and this could translate to their social functioning in childhood. For example, not wanting to share toys at recess if they grew up seeing their parents be possessive and greedy with one another. Psychologist Ainsworth poses a theory of attachment that suggests that people are born with a need to forge bonds with their caregivers as children, and early bonds may continue to have an effect later in their life. So a traumatic environment could lead to an infant developing an avoidant or ambivalent attachment as opposed to a secure one. This also connects to Erik Erikson's concept of basic trust versus distrust. Basic distrust would be the result of unmet needs, where the child forms an impression that the world is difficult or unreliable. Long-term implications of this attachment quality show that securely attached children have more positive interactions with their peers, more curiosity and confidence in themselves. So the flip side of that would be that insecurely attached children, or children that were insecurely attached in infancy, might have more negative interactions with their peers during childhood and lack the self-confidence and the ability to make friends because they are inherently distrusting of the world around them. But this cycle of insecure attachment can be broken with intervention, fortunately, such as with therapy and just general support to this child. Although our study focuses on abuse between parents rather than abuse to children, the intimate partner violence could lead to neglect of the child and could lead them to suffer from non-organic failure to thrive. Another main theory of human development is the mechanistic model. This states that development can be understood as the change from one state of affairs to another through internal and external causes, which means that, strictly speaking, qualitatively different stages cannot be distinguished from one another. Our study looks at the effects of outside stimuli on a child's social development and assumes that the difference in outcome is due to this exposure to violence during infancy rather than due to inherent internal differences between groups. So that just about wraps up our presentation. I hope you enjoyed.